Welcome to the show, Cait. I have been so looking forward to having you on.
Hi, Kylie. I know people are going to get a little bit of an inside look into our mini podcast voice notes that we like to send each other.
I know. Okay. So Cait is amazing. And I am so grateful that she came into my world. And I always feel like there's there's always divine things working because you came into my life pretty early on in me becoming an entrepreneur. And I was like, I want to create a network of amazing, female entrepreneurs that I can send a voice note to if I'm like, I need to just brainstorm or brain dump this with somebody. And Cait and I kind of dove into that right away. And we do kind of have a joke that we are those people who do send 10-minute, 15-minute text messages to each other that it's like, all right, podcast number 10 coming your way.
Yep. Sorry. Feel free to listen when you're drinking your coffee tomorrow.
And we're both moms. So it's always usually a delayed response, but it's all good.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Mm-hmm. So Cait is, there's so many things we're going to dive into, but Cait is a staple in the podcast industry. She has the Amplify Boutique, which is a production agency, but at the end of the day, also, Cait has so much heart for moms who are podcasters and females who are podcasters. So we're going to dive into a lot of stuff today, from your production tips to tips for mom podcasters to why you do what you do and everything in between. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So you have worked with a lot of big name podcasters and helped them grow their shows. You have over 5 million downloads total for all of your shows that you produce, which is huge. So now I'm not necessarily the go-to person for launching a podcast and starting a podcast, but you do that and you do it so well. So for listeners who want to launch a podcast or who have been kind of working behind the scenes to get it going, what tips do you have to make a launch really successful?
Yeah. So I have been doing podcast launches specifically since 2019. So I've seen it change and shift a little bit over the last 7 years, just as we know, video coming more on board and things like that, and social media changing a little bit, but even Apple algorithm changing a little bit, things that we may have pushed a couple of years ago, like ratings and reviews are really important at launch, aren't necessarily as important anymore when it comes to the algorithms of when you're going to show up in charts and things like that. So things have changed and shifted over the years, but I have worked with over 100 entrepreneurs at this point to launch their shows. And I will caveat, the through thread is I work with women entrepreneurs who are leveraging podcasting as a part of their business. So unfortunately, I'm not working with crime podcasts. I think that would be really fun. But a whole other niche of things. But I know your women listening here are in that same kind of boat as well. So I think everything I'll speak to will be applicable to them, where sometimes you can get podcast advice that maybe applies to larger celebrity shows or different types of shows, but not necessarily to someone who's building a business. And I think it's really important to just be aware of that, especially we can talk about this, but when you're setting goals, when you're looking at what is a successful launch, what does that even look like? So I would say at this point in 2025, we're going into 2026. My biggest tips around launch are going to be to have I think there's, and you speak to this so well too, Kylie, but there's some fear, I think, around niching down. Yeah. And especially when it comes to a podcast and you want to talk about all the things, right? Mm-hmm. But I think especially at launch and to see that initial success and growth of your show, it's really important to be as niche as possible so that it's so easy for people to know, is this show for me or not? Mm-hmm. And as you grow, you can get a little bit more broad and you can start to add in different topics and more things like that. But I would say this applies to general business strategy too. But at the beginning, as you're trying to get your show off the ground, as you're trying to build your listenership, you want it to be really clear. And that also then enables you to utilize SEO strategies way more effectively because you actually know what those keywords are because you are kind of driving into one thing. So at launch, I would recommend being as specific as possible. And then from like a technical standpoint, I always want clients to launch with 3 to 5 episodes, and to have a little bit of a bank. And this can be, I always say this, especially because I work with a lot of moms, you do have to look at 2 things. So you have to look at, one, that is a batch of episodes that then once they're out, like you're continuing on the road of like weekly drops, right? So if that feels really overwhelming, that, man, it would feel way better for me to have these 5 episodes batch and I'm releasing them one at a time, then you have to think about that. Like if that's going to help you and not burn out. But if it's possible for you to have a batch to release at launch and then continue on a normal cadence, that's my recommendation from a algorithm standpoint on Apple and Spotify, because what they're looking at this point, and you may have spoken to this on the show already, but I'll remind people, what they're looking at this point is velocity of downloads and velocity of like new subscribers. So that's why at launch is typically like your best bet for landing in the charts, because it is that time where you're going to get so many new subscribers. Everybody's new, right? At launch. So we want to really leverage that at launch and that velocity of download. So having more than 1 episode to download can really help in that chart placement as well. And so from a launch strategy, I just love for them to show up in the charts. I think that helps give a little bit of credibility and also helps them to get found more organically in those first few weeks too of their show. And then from there, I mean, the goal is like, if you can kind of keep that momentum, for most of my clients, what we'll see is they may pop out of like the top 100 or their top 50 or whatever, but then they'll maybe have a bigger guest or something like that. And that velocity of like new subscribers and stuff will happen again. And so they'll pop back into the charts. So at launch, I think that's really successful. The other tip that I'll share, again, I think ratings and reviews are still important, even though I don't think they play into the ranking algorithm. I do still think they're important from a credibility standpoint. So at launch, I like my clients to create like a small subset hype group. So, kind of your ride or dies, like your clients, your close friends, like the people who are with you, and have them, like typically we'll drop episode 1 or we'll drop the trailer a little bit early and have them go ahead and go in and rate and review the show. So on launch day, those ratings and reviews are there. Because as you know, it can take like 24 hours for those things to even show up. So we'll do that to kind of have that rating and review credibility. But then for launch, my main call to action for all of my clients is to have people share the show. Like if you're going to do a giveaway, if you're going to do any kind of incentive for the launch, like do it for people sharing to their audience, because that's going to be the best thing that can happen, even more so at that point than ratings and reviews.
Oh my gosh, everything you said is so good. And I want to highlight a few things. One, the fact that you talked about niche is so good, because we can then figure out what keywords we want to rank for organically and really lean into those, versus I do have clients who are like, well, I'm kind of just like a mindset-y, and it's like, okay, well, so I love that. I also, this is such a fun timing for you to talk about ratings and reviews versus like the velocity. I did a test, and I just did like, leave me a rating and review. And then I'll give you, I'm giving away a free audit, which was great. And it is so good for credibility, right? People want to see what kind of, feedback and things like that.
When they go to a new show, they're scrolling down there and they're like, and if they see people being like, this was so helpful, like, wow, like then they're like, okay, I need to listen.
But then it did not help me with charts. However, the other side of it was that I went in front of some other people's audience and got in front of their audience, and my show skyrocketed to like 25 in the marketing category and hung out there for a while because it was like new people. So I will say, if you're looking for the chart ranking, definitely velocity, exactly what you said. I love that so much. And then share. These are so good. Okay. So now I want to hear, if somebody's rebranding, do you do rebranding with clients ever? What are your thoughts on that? What's the best way to go about it? I get asked questions about this a lot. I feel like there's kind of a resurgence of like these female podcasters who started a show and they're like, that is not me. That is not my topic. Like, how do I redo this without totally starting from scratch?
Yes. So good. Okay. So good. And so I actually have two clients kind of walking through this right now.
Mm-hmm.
And one is more like, it's kind of I think we need to rebrand, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if we think about your goals for your business, so end of the day, a podcast is a lot of work. It is and not in a way of like I'm being negative or like, that kind of thing, but I just mean like to put out quality content on a weekly consistent basis when you're also running a business is not for the faint of heart. And you're either spending time or you're spending money. So either way, like you're investing into it.
Mm-hmm.
So you want that investment to make sense. You want it to align with your business and your business goals. And so if you hit a point where you're like, okay, wait, this is what I want to be doing in my business, but I built my podcast for business goals of 2 years ago. Well, it's not going to make sense anymore. Right. And you're going to kind of go down two paths. You're either going to just burn out on the podcast completely because it isn't making sense anymore for your business, or you're going to be like continuing to spin wheels and this isn't really driving or having the most potential that you could for what you're trying to do in your business. So, when I think about this one client, I'm thinking about like where they're at in their business goals and what they want to do. Where their branding is again, kind of like what we said, like too general and is like speaking to a different audience. The other client that I'll say that's really interesting. So she has niched. And so, for example, at one point she talked all about digital products and creating digital products and that kind of thing. And then now she has niched into a specific digital product platform. Okay. And so she has all these past episodes that are a little bit more general. So if new people are coming in and they're really interested in that specific platform, they can still gain insight and knowledge from these other episodes, but her calls to actions on those might be a little bit different. And so what we're doing is, and this is a little bit easier if you don't have a huge back catalog, but we are going to be going back into her back catalog slowly and just popping on a new intro to those episodes to just kind of set the stage of like, we've kind of shifted and we've niched. So if you're listening to this episode now, like we have shifted. And so those new kind of call to actions and making sure like show notes and stuff are updated as well with the newest call to actions, which hosting platforms have made that so much easier now with like dynamic footers and being able to add in dynamic content. But I would say at the end of the day, like, don't be afraid to rebrand. Again, if it is going to make more sense for your business and make more sense for your business goals, I do not see there is a way to make sure that the work that you've done in those past episodes can still make sense for what's coming. And I think the longer that you like stop yourself from like that evolution that you're stepping into, like your listeners will feel that. They're going to feel that your excitement isn't there anymore, And so I think the best thing you can do for yourself is step into whatever that evolution is.
I love that. Your answer is so spot on. I'm not even going to add to it because I'm just like, yes, I agree so much. And I hope anyone who's thinking about that just really takes that to heart, because that at the end of the day, again, it needs to like, your heart needs to be in the podcast because it's not for it's not for the faint of heart at all. So
it's not. And I think if you're not in it, like it is going to be so hard to stick with it when the newest like Instagram trend comes down or like, oh, maybe I need to be doing this, right? It's going to be hard to like stick with it when you're not excited about it.
Yeah. Okay. So when I think of like, for me, podcast production is such an important part of the process. And when we talk about podcasters burning out, like that is going to be such a big piece of why you burn out, right? Because it takes a lot. So you and your husband do a lot of the podcast production stuff for clients. So I would love for you to share a little bit about like, how can we make podcast production really simple? And totally feel free to share about your services because they can only serve people in my audience in a really big way.
Yeah. And I would say, so when we started our company, what I found was, and my husband has an audio engineering and video editing background. So he had the skill sets. And this again, 2019 was before AI really came on the scene with some of the tools that have now thankfully made it easier for people when they are DIYing. But even still, when we first started and even now, the main thing that I found was, the podcaster, they love creating the content. They love like outlining it, ideating it, recording it. But like, there's a huge stop gap from then like, okay, now I need to take it to the finish line. Now I have to like listen to my voice again. And now I need to like make sure, that there weren't mistakes or, that type of thing. Make sure that it's something I want to put out onto the air. And so there was a big stop gap there. And so being able to take that other side off of their plate, because again, just as an entrepreneur in general, when you think about your time and where it's best spent, my clients were able to do more for their business with that time than if they were sitting editing their podcast. And it was something they could easily outsource. I always tell my clients, like, I can't actually record the podcast for you, but I can do everything else. Like I can take everything else off of your plate to take that pressure off. And I do think, especially with mom entrepreneurs and even just the entrepreneurs in general, we're so busy, like to be able to have that space and to know like all I have to worry about is recording just takes such a mental lift off. And so that's what we've really found. And that our podcasters, we've had clients with us since 2019 that they would not continue to be podcasting if they didn't have that back end support, because they would have, just when life happens and they don't have as much time, like, yes, they can like get an episode out, but knowing like everything else is taken care of. And because of that, like they're able to remain consistent, which when it comes to podcasting and long form content and being successful with your podcast is to be showing up consistently. So to be able to support that, I think is really helpful. Now in 2025, I think my recommendations for people from a production standpoint, especially, if they're doing it themselves, is make it as simple as possible. Like this microphone that I'm on right now is a USB microphone. It plugs directly into your computer. You don't have to have a fancy interface. It gets great audio. There's some great like lapel mics. I can actually plug this into my phone and record a voice memo at this point on my phone through this microphone and make it as simple as possible. Now with platforms like Descript and Riverside and things like that, it makes it easy to record and edit all in one place if you want to be able to do that. So I would say like, don't overcomplicate it. And there's always I have clients when they launch, it's like, sometimes we just need to get the basics down. Like, let's just get going. Let's get comfortable on the microphone. And then we can add in maybe fancier video. Maybe then we can do an upgrade over here. But like, let's get comfortable with what we have. And again, because what I find is if your setup is super complicated and you have to spend 15, 20 minutes every time you go to record an episode, like that's just going to add to the burden of doing it. And then the same on the other side. Like, yes, AI has made things easier, but there's still a process that has to happen to everything to get it ready to post and publish. And so if you are able to outsource and you are able to get that off your plate, I think it's really smart, because I think, again, as a business owner, that time can be spent doing other business activities that only you can do.
Oh my gosh. Yes. You're so generous. Like to give those tips. I'm always like, just go outsource it. Go outsource.
Right.
Like,
I know.
Me,
yes.
If you want to go long term, if you're serious about this, like find a way to outsource early on. I love that.
Yes.
Okay, Cait, I've been so excited to talk to you about private podcasts, because I know this is something that you've had success with, you're passionate about. So I want to hear like how you use them with your clients, any results you've gotten, the benefit you see behind them, and who could use that and how.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's been, I guess 2022 is when I first started to kind of launch and do private podcasts for clients. And, when I think about private podcasts, I actually see it a couple of different ways. So I think of even private podcasts and is like, in general, audioizing your content and creating more accessibility for your clients. So the one piece of it is like the true private podcast funnel, which at this point, there are a few different people who are implementing those. So you may be familiar with it. It's something that I've been implementing with clients again since 2022 and have seen really good success with it as a lead magnet, as sort of an alternative to a masterclass, or even running in tandem to a masterclass, where you can really think of the private podcast as like a masterclass broken up into more bite-sized pieces if you think of like a masterclass funnel. And so it's very much intended to meet the person where they are and nurture them into a specific offer. So if you're a podcaster who has a podcast, like a weekly podcast, you may be speaking to different topics in your niche and in your area. And so it may be more general nurturing, where a private podcast is very specific nurturing into an offer. Is this offer for me or not? Like at the end of the private podcast, I wanted to almost serve as like a sales call, if you will, that by the end of it, they can make that decision of, is this for me? Is it not for me? And is this the person for me to do it with? And so to have that on the front end as a lead magnet, so you're also capturing their email to get access to it, and then kind of bringing them through that process, and then having a good email nurture on the back end, I think is really important too, to kind of bring people through. So that's like the one side of private podcasting, right? And then the other side of private podcasting that I love and have implemented with a lot of my clients is audioizing their content. So if they have memberships, for example, or masterminds where they are hosting expert calls and they have all these great things going on, especially because I work with so many mom entrepreneurs, making that content more accessible for their people so that when they're going to school drop off or they're going to soccer practice, like they can listen to that expert call and they don't have to try to like log into Circle and get the video playing and that kind of thing. But there's a private podcast feed that they can plug into. And I think that that's so powerful, because when you're building an offer or when you have something where you're trying to create transformation for people, they can only have that transformation if they're actually able to consume what you're teaching. And so I think it's a great way to make that more accessible. And then the other kind of the third way that I've seen private podcasting use that I love is more of like extra content, right? So I think this is actually probably where we first saw private podcasting come onto the game when we think about like Patreon. And again, when I think about like crime podcasts, and they would have extra bonus content that was only available through their private podcast feed. So I see that as applicable to our audience and women entrepreneurs, that they can also leverage that for bonus content, for extra content, for Q&A, for deeper coaching, for things like that, where maybe you're going to pay a little bit extra to have access to.
I love that. And I especially love having that as like an add-on to a membership or a digital course or something like that, where they can take it on the go. What's your favorite platform for hosting a private podcast?
Hello Audio, hands down.
Me too.
Yeah. It's the easiest to use. That was built for it, really, where other hosts have maybe kind of added it in. Hello Audio is very much built for it, and it has implemented a ton of integrations to make it easy for using it as a funnel, using it as a part of your offers. So yeah, they're the best, and they have great support too.
I love that. Okay, one more question going back to the actual podcast funnel that leads into an offer. Do you generally recommend, like, is it a low ticket offer? Have you seen these work for like larger offers? Like, what's kind of the most successful price range?
Yeah, I would say that the ones that I've implemented are a middle price range. So, but like a program, if you're thinking like a group program, mastermind type of program, like 1,500 to 2,500 is where I've seen these be really successful for nurturing. I don't know that they would necessarily be, I think they could go into anything lower than that too, I think. But I've also seen people use them for even like higher ticket, like, really like luxury high end clients as well. Again, to just give them almost more information on like how we work and how my process works. And does this fit into it?
I love that so much. Amazing.
Yeah, I think it can be really flexible, which is fun.
Yep. And I even think like if you do have a higher ticket, something, it could lead into like a discovery call. And then, you already have them so primed at that point that it's like a yes once you get on the call. So fun. I love those. All of those. Okay. Talk to me about Mom Friends Network. This is very exciting. I know you guys have been working very hard on it. So go ahead. Tell me the heart behind it, the vision for it and all of that.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the space to talk about it. It's something I'm really excited about, and it's a new kind of branch of my business. And as I think about kind of what's next and supporting the mom podcast community, my colleague Amanda and I, last year, for the last 2 years, have done a conference, Podcasting Moms Conference. Last year, I was much more involved in putting the conference on and creating the programming and all of the things. And last year's conference, we really just saw this gap of like, there's a gap in community for mom podcasters. And also just for support of the mom podcaster who maybe they're not large enough yet to join a network, like a big network, like you would imagine, but they have a niche following. They have a built listenership. They built trust with their people. And there is a advantage to brands for that. And so looking at like, how can we help these podcasters make money from the content that they're putting out and also bring brand awareness to these brands that are doing great things? And so really looking at, is there a way to connect mom-focused podcasts with mom-focused brands? And at the heart of both of them, creating a better world for our daughters to grow up in. Like if I'm going to create something and I'm going to create a business around it, like I want it to be something that is making the world easier for moms and especially moms in the entrepreneur space. So that's really the heart behind it. And what that looks like now is, how do we find those initial partners? And so like right now I'm working with podcasts that I'm currently working with production wise who kind of fall under these umbrellas and looking at what partners would be good to connect them with. And again, making it a very synergistic partnership where it's not just like a Casper mattress, right? Or it's not just like this general brand, but it very much is like a podcast talking to postpartum moms partnering with a clothing brand that creates loungewear sets that are sweat wicking for women in postpartum and hormone changing parts of their life, right? So that it makes so much sense together and it's a win-win. So that's the heart behind it. And that will lead into kind of our conference for this year. It will Mom Friends Media will kind of be the next evolution of the Podcasting Moms Conference and what that looks like. And so in April, we'll be doing that. And I know Amanda and I are going to come on and chat again and just have like more roundtable discussion, which is going to be so fun around all things podcasting. But what it looks like right now in the interim is building a community for mom podcasters. And that looks like a bank of DIY resources. That looks like collaboration and connection between the mom podcasters in the community. That looks like just a little bit deeper level of support than they have, like operating in their own silo. So we'll be launching that. And so when this episode airs, we'll actually be having a Black Friday kind of founding members deal. So we'll make sure we put that link there that you can go check that out and find out more about that if you want to be connected to that community. And that will really be sort of our place to build the larger community around supporting mom podcasters.
I'm so excited because it's so needed. And also, like, we don't want to be promoting these brands that every other podcast is promoting that we're not actually using, and it doesn't really make sense for our audience. Would you do one clarifying thing though?
Yeah.
So does it have to be a podcast about something to do with moms or kids or something? Like who's ideal for it?
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be a mom kid topic. It is just that their primary audience is moms and I think we've even it is a little bit more broad that like women and moms, because typically women have either been moms or they're going to be moms, or even if they're not moms, they're probably like we all can connect to that. All moms are women, so if there are women focused as well, I think that will play into it.
I'm so excited, Cait. Like, I am so excited for you to share that with the world. And for, when I think about that, I'm like, how is this not going to be the biggest thing? Because we need it and it just feels so good. And so where can my listeners find out more about you? I know you have some exciting things to share with them.
Yeah. So they can follow Instagram, Hey Cait Howard, and then Amplify Boutique is connected to that. So if you're interested in working with an agency, Mom Friends Media, you can connect through my profile to that as well. And then if you want to hear just like some fun combos around being an ambitious mom, I also have a podcast called Ambitious Moms Club. And we're going to have Kylie on over there for fun discussion as well. But you can listen and tune in there. It's my friend Jordan and I, and we talk all things balancing business and motherhood.
It's so good. What would you say motherhood has taught you about running your own business, being an entrepreneur, juggling all the things?
Yeah, when I think about my motherhood journey, I really started my business when I was pregnant with my first. So my business has really grown as I've become a mom and had my babies, my 3 little girls. And so that's been really interesting to look at like the parallels of the growth and as a mom and growth as a business owner. But I would say that, I think a little bit of an advantage that I had in that was being a mom just really shows you what your priorities are. And so I think as an entrepreneur, then even from the beginning, I only have so much time. I only have so much space, and so setting boundaries as much as I could at the beginning and protecting my energy and protecting my time. But I also think that it has shown me how we can just, I don't know. Motherhood for me has opened my eyes to the lack of connection that I see in our world today. That I think mothers and people parenting had before. And so it's really opened my eyes, I think, to my purpose that I didn't see before becoming a mom, because I didn't see that gap, but now I do. And I see how even in younger, like even not even moms, but like, younger generations, the lack of connection and how we as moms are creating that example now for our kids to carry that on of what does it look like to truly be connected to each other. So a little long-winded, but yeah.
No, it's so beautiful. I couldn't agree more. I had chills while you were sharing that. So thank you, Cait. Thank you for being here, for sharing your heart. I just admire you so much. I'm so grateful for you. And I can't wait to see all the amazing things that come to you, your podcast, the network, all of the things. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kylie. I appreciate you so much. Feeling is mutual.